right, it's another episode of Film Study by the Numbers. Ken McKusick, Dan Rees, how you guys doing?
Life's good. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing good. Now, we're going to look at some of these numbers, kind of looking back at the Washington football game as well as ahead. And I'm guessing neither one of you wrote down the number 11.
No. What's the
Um,
number 11 mean,
the
Josh?
number 11 is how many miles outside of D.C. FedEx Field is.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right.
You
It's a
know,
good
because
dig into
the,
Dan Snyder kind of
right,
number. Yeah.
which is why they kept saying coming to you from Maryland during the Washington football team game.
All
But
righty. Well,
why don't we get
obviously,
into real numbers that matter?
the layer of bile that Josh adds to the show, we'll just move by that and go to the numbers. Dan, why don't you start us off with your first number?
All right, sounds good. First number, 43%. 43% was Lamar Jackson's completion percentage in week 4 on passes over 20 air yards. Before week 4, Lamar Jackson was 1 for 9, so obviously a significant improvement. Connected on a few big ones, so that was really nice. NFL average for comparison over the first 4 weeks is about 38%. So overall now, Lamar is at 25%. So still not at the NFL average, but a good week 4.
Improved, certainly. Joe Burrow has not been good on the long pass either this year, so we'll see him on Sunday. I'm going to go to an offensive line set of numbers 0, 4, and 3.03. 0 is the number of pass blocking events surrendered by Orlando Brown versus Washington. 4 is the number of active first round draft picks on that Washington defensive line. That's an unbelievable number, frankly. And 3.03 is the time to throw average for Lamar Jackson in week 4, which is one of the highest in the league and really is indicative of the way he extended plays effectively in the game. Nice pass to Brown down the right seam. Another beauty that was the throw of the game, certainly, maybe of the season, in terms of fitting the throw in the corner of the end zone to Andrews.
Yeah, the makeshift line really held up pretty well. Hopefully, we don't have to test that too much going forward, but they held up pretty well against Washington. So, all right, next numbers 0.875. That's the average air yards on completions by Dwayne Haskins before garbage time. So less than 1 yard in the air on completions from Haskins before garbage time. So garbage time is based off of win percentage of 5% to 95%. And just for reference, that was when the Ravens were up 28-10. So that's before that. He had completed 16 passes out of 23, 8 of which were behind the line of scrimmage. So tons of dink and dunk passes. Unfortunately, they resulted in 133 yards after catch, which was 8.3 per completion.
Wow.
For comparison, the NFL average in 2020 is over 6 air yards per completion and 5 yards after catch per completion. So well below air yards, well above yards after catch.
Yeah, it really paints a picture of what the Redskins were trying to do in terms of the passing game. Let me try and approach that same thing from a different angle with 31%, 10, 3, and 3. 31% was the blitz rate for the Ravens, which, hey, you don't want to blitz a team that's constantly throwing a lot of screen passes, a lot of short crosses, a lot of get the ball out of the hands of the quarterback quickly. Martindale adapted very quickly to that. Didn't blitz a lot in this game relative to the normal amount the Ravens would go after the quarterback. Only 10 blitzes from off the line of scrimmage. That 0.21 per drop back, much lower than he's used over his tenure with the Ravens here. 3 stunts the entire game. They had 17 against Kansas City. In fact, 2 of the stunts came on one play at the end of the game. And only 3 drops of 2+ from the line of scrimmage. So that simulated pressure was not part of the Ravens' look either. That's probably a good thing when the ball's out quickly. Again, is to not be simulating pressure because those players are obviously at a significant disadvantage to disrupting routes and whatnot. So I'll paint the picture of a really passive pass rush against Haskins. And Haskins still, as your numbers show, did not test the Ravens deep very often, really not until the end of the game on the long throw over Khalil Dorsey in his first NFL snap.
Yeah, definitely different than how they normally face rookie QBs, but seemed appropriate based off of the checkdowns that he was throwing. All right. Third number, switching back to the Ravens offense, 115. That's the yards of rushing on designed run plays to wide right side. This is really relevant because DJ Fluker was on playing right tackle this week, and he did a pretty solid job, especially up until 2 holding calls at the end of the game there. But that's 115 yards on 16 rushes to the right, which is over 7 yards per rush. That's compared to 12 yards on 7 rushes to the left and 7 yards on 4 rushes to the center. So not much success to the left or the center, but a ton of success to the right. Very interesting.
Yeah, great game for Fluker in terms of what he did to come in and help the Ravens go in this game. I'm gonna talk about a marginally related statistic, and that's 37.5%. That's the percentage of the Ravens plays with motion at the snap, and that's per ESPN video team from ESPN. It's by far the highest in the NFL. The Rams are at 29%. They're second. The median is only 11.4%, less than a third of what the Ravens do. A lot of that is because some of it is because there are a higher percentage of motion plays at the snap on run plays. A lot of design motion, even with a receiver, is intended to try and unravel what the coverage is, try and interpret what the coverage is, and will end up with a receiver going into another spot and not necessarily using that motion to get a clean break off the line of scrimmage. The Ravens are different. They use their motion to get a blocking advantage, and so they're really mostly using it on run plays, using a tight end, using Ricard or Boyle specifically, most of the time, sometimes Snead, to get a good block off the line of scrimmage. But I thought that was very different, and that definitely those players in motion, and the Ravens' run game is very right-handed, are what a lot of times will give them that blocking advantage they need to get a run and play started.
Yeah, definitely fun to see them, those big blockers, get a running head start before they go for the block. I remember also last year you had mentioned it was nice to also confuse for the mesh point as well, give it a little bit more blocking in the vision for the linebackers. So that's another added advantage of that motion. So, all right, jumping to the next stat, 64% versus 52%. That's the passing percentage for the Ravens on second down for 2020 versus 2019. So an increase in pass percentage by 12% in 2020. And it's really interesting to see because the Ravens are, especially over last year and a little bit this year, but not nearly as much, were known to be a run-heavy team. So increasing the pass percentage to 64% on second down is pretty significant. Average yards have increased slightly by a yard from 2019 to 2020, from 7.2 to 8.3. One of the really interesting things, however, is that the series success rate for pass plays is only 53% versus run plays on second down are 86%. So that series success rate is the chance of the chance of getting a first down on that series. So really interesting to see that running on second down has been a lot more successful for the Ravens this year. So we'll see how that continues going forward.
Okay, and folks haven't seen it. There's a great study by Dan out in the articles still, or actually I think it's in the videos, where he takes you through a lot of charts and graphs to talk about how series success rate differed by run and pass. And the Ravens were extraordinarily different from the rest of the NFL last year in terms of their ability to succeed with the run. So it was really interesting stuff, I thought. I'll move on. I've got 40.7% and 6.2. 40.7% is the percentage of 8+ man boxes faced by Gus Edwards. That's the highest in the NFL. 33% is next. Forget who that was. And he's ran for 6.2 yards per carry, which is the second highest. And you really pointed out, Dan, that this is a real dichotomy to face the most 8+ man boxes, even though the Ravens are typically equipped to get an extra man at the point of attack, both by having a pulling guard and having a fullback. It's still remarkable that Edwards is able to have such success versus very tight boxes. And frankly, in some of the situations he runs in terms of game time, he gets a lot of his time as a quote-unquote closer at the end of games when the other team knows the Ravens are trying to run out the clock, and he's still able to do it anyway. Just a remarkable year so far for Gus Edwards in terms of beating the odds and coming up with a really high yards per carry number.
Yeah, and luckily it hasn't come into play too much this year, but it's such an important thing to be able to close out games, close games, by doing that. Run out the clock when they know you're trying to run. So that's such a crucial thing to have for the Ravens. So the fact that he's been able to do that has been amazing. So. All right, my last stat, looking forward to this week's game against Cincinnati, 107. That's the sack yards lost by Joe Burrow. That's the worst in the NFL. He's been sacked 15 times, which is second most in the NFL, and as I mentioned, for 107 yards. Only one sack last week, however, and in the first 3 games, he played some very tough teams, the Chargers, the Eagles, and the Browns. So I think it'll be definitely, hopefully we can see the Ravens increase that sack count and for some big yards lost this week.
Yeah, now Burrow has been a quarterback who's been very effective between 10 and 20 yards this year, just ridiculously effective, frankly. And, that's particularly in the middle of the field where a lot of the Ravens' weakness is, behind those linebackers who've looked a little lost in coverage, I think would be fair to say so far. So I question whether or not that'll mean the same kind of pressure level we'll see from Martindale this week in terms of what he's willing to do to get after Burrow. All right, let me toss one more out there. 11.85 and 17.5. Can't resist this one. Those are the number of millions of dollars remaining on J.J. Watt's contract for the years 2020 and 2021, respectively. I don't like win now moves. Okay, I really don't like win now moves in a year with COVID and the chance that, hey, this season might not get finished. Or if it does, there's a big asterisk all over. Or if it does, the Ravens have their own COVID problems and don't have the year they expect to have, but still invest a lot of money in it. And also that they give up cap dollars for next year when they have some players they need to sign, most notably Stanley and Jackson now at this point. But if you're going to do a win now move, you may as well go all in on a player like J.J. Watt, who would completely transform this Ravens defense. And I'd be interested to hear from you, Dan, what you'd like to trade, what you'd be willing to trade in terms of draft capital to get him.
With 2 years left, jeez, probably pretty high. I think probably a second, because you got to expect back a comp pick at the end. So I'd probably say a second seems reasonable.
Right, second, and then in, I guess it'd be 3 years, you might get a third back if Watt
Right.
signs one more big contract, and that's a possibility. It's probably not unreasonable. A second for the Ravens is pretty far down there. I guess one of the things you'd have to ask yourself is, would you right now trade J.K. Dobbins away to get J.J. Watt?
Ugh, what? Well, yeah. The fourth running back or third running back, I guess. Yeah, I would.
It might be. Okay. All right. That's good to know. All right. Well,
Yeah, it's an exciting one. That'd be fun. I understand all your qualifiers, but it would be definitely a fun one. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. We always have fun with this, Dan. Appreciate you joining us. You follow Dan at DPReese8, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Wonderful. And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.